My husband's sister deliberately ruined my wedding cake. I ruined her entire life. Rebecca hated me from day one. When Tommy introduced me 3 years ago, she looked me up and down and said, "You're not what I expected." What she expected was someone rich, someone with connections, someone who could elevate their family status. I was a teacher making $35,000 a year. Strike one. Strike two was when I didn't let her control our engagement party. She'd planned the whole thing without asking. Rented a country club, invited her friends, ordered catering. "Surprise," she said. "I've handled everything. I canceled it all. Planned a backyard barbecue instead." She told everyone I was ungrateful. Strike three was choosing my own wedding dress. She'd made an appointment at the boutique where her rich friends shop. Dresses starting at $10,000. I bought mine online for $300. She told Tommy I was embarrassing the family. "She's trying to make us look poor," Rebecca complained. "What will people think?" The wedding planning was war. Every decision I made, she tried to override. I picked roses, she ordered orchids. I chose a DJ, she hired a string quartet. I selected a photographer, she booked her friend who did her wedding. Each time, Tommy backed me. Each time, Rebecca got angrier. The week before the wedding, she made her last attempt. "I've been thinking," she said at dinner. "Maybe we should postpone. Give you time to plan something more appropriate." "It's planned," I said. "Everything's perfect." "Perfect?" She laughed. "A church basement reception? Grocery store flowers? That cake from some nobody bakery?" The cake. 5 tiers of vanilla and lemon, decorated with handmade sugar flowers. The baker, Mrs. Yoon, had worked on it for weeks. It cost $2,000, our biggest expense. Rebecca didn't know that. She assumed it was cheap because it wasn't from her approved vendors. Wedding day arrived. The ceremony was beautiful. Tommy cried when he saw me. Rebecca wore white. Not cream, not ivory. White. A designer dress that cost more than our entire wedding. "I forgot about the color rule," she said when people stared. "Oops." We took photos while the reception was being set up. Rebecca disappeared, saying she needed to fix her makeup. 20 minutes before guests would arrive for dinner, the coordinator pulled me aside. "There's a problem with the cake." I ran to the reception hall. The cake was destroyed. Not just damaged. Destroyed. All 5 tiers had been pushed over. Frosting everywhere. Sugar flowers crushed. Handwriting in the frosting. "Oops." Rebecca's signature move. I stood there shaking. Tommy held me while I sobbed. My perfect cake. Gone. His mother tried to comfort me. "Accidents happen," she said. "Rebecca said she saw some kids run through earlier." Rebecca appeared. Fake concern plastered on her face. "Oh no. What happened? This is terrible. Good thing it's just cake, right? Not important in the grand scheme." That's when the baker arrived with the backup flowers. She saw the destruction and gasped. "Who would do this?" She pulled out her phone. "I should check the security footage." I set up a camera to do a time-lapse of the setup. My heart stopped. Rebecca's face went white. "Security footage?" "Oh yes," Mrs. Yoon said. "I always record setup for my portfolio. Let's see what happened." The video was perfect. Crystal clear. Rebecca walking in, looking around, picking up the serving knife, deliberately pushing each tier, taking her finger and writing "oops" in the frosting, smiling at her work. The room was silent. Tommy's mother grabbed Rebecca's arm. "How could you?" Rebecca tried to lie. "That's not what it looks like. I was trying to fix it." The tears were sliding. "We can see you pushing them," Tommy said quietly. "We can see you writing oops." But I wasn't done. See, Rebecca didn't know something important. Her husband Craig had been texting me for weeks. Not inappropriately. Desperately. "Is Rebecca having an affair?" he'd asked. "She's never home. Always secret phone calls. Hidden credit cards. I need to know." I told him I didn't know anything. That was true then. But that morning, while Rebecca was getting ready, her phone had buzzed. A text from someone named Antonio. "Can't wait to see you next week when Craig's away." I hadn't said anything. But now it was time. "Craig," I said loudly, "you should probably know why Rebecca was late to the ceremony." Craig looked up from where he'd been studying the cake video. "What?" "Check her phone. Antonio's been texting." Rebecca lunged for her purse, but Craig was faster. He found the texts immediately. Months of them. Pictures. Plans. Details about using Craig's money for their trips. "You said you were at your mother's last weekend," Craig said, his voice breaking. "You were with him? While I watched the kids?" The room was frozen. Craig stood there holding Rebecca's phone like it might explode in his hands. Rebecca lunged forward trying to grab it, but Tommy stepped between them and put his hand on his sister's shoulder. She shook him off and reached around him, but Tommy stayed firm. 70 people watched this happen in complete silence. I could hear my own breathing. Someone's chair scraped against the floor. Rebecca's face was red and wet with tears. Craig scrolled through more messages, his thumb moving slowly down the screen. I watched his expression change from shock to something harder. Tommy's grip on Rebecca's shoulder tightened when she tried to push past him again. The wedding coordinator stood frozen near the cake table, her clipboard hanging loose in her hand. Mrs. Yoon had her phone out, still showing the video of Rebecca destroying my cake. Everything felt like it was happening in slow motion, and too fast at the same time. I realized what I'd done. I'd wanted Rebecca to face consequences for ruining my cake. But this was bigger. Way bigger. Craig's kids were somewhere in this building. His whole marriage was ending right here in front of everyone we knew. My moment of revenge had turned into something I couldn't control anymore. Rebecca started crying harder, and her voice came out high and desperate. She said the texts were fake. Someone must have hacked her phone. She looked around at all the guests like she was searching for someone to believe her. Craig didn't look up from the phone. He just kept scrolling and reading. Then he stopped and his voice came out quiet, but everyone could hear it in the silent room. He read out loud that Rebecca had texted Antonio saying she loved him more than she'd ever loved her husband, that Antonio made her feel alive in ways Craig never could. Rebecca made a sound like she'd been hit. She said that wasn't real, that someone was trying to destroy her marriage. Tommy's mother pushed through the crowd and grabbed Craig's arm. She said they should all calm down and discuss this privately. This wasn't the time or place. Craig pulled his arm away and looked at her. He said no. Rebecca chose to destroy Bella's wedding publicly, so she could face her consequences publicly too. He went back to scrolling through the phone. His hands were shaking, but his voice stayed steady. He read another message about Rebecca using his credit card to book a hotel room. Another about her telling Antonio that Craig was too boring and predictable. Rebecca kept saying it wasn't true, wasn't real. Someone was setting her up. But Craig found photos. I could see them from where I stood. Pictures of Rebecca with a man I didn't recognize. His arm around her laughing, kissing. Tommy made a sound in his throat and looked away. Craig's brother pushed through the crowd and Craig handed him the phone. He asked him to forward everything to his email address. All of it. Every text, every photo, every piece of evidence. His brother took the phone and started tapping the screen. Craig looked at Rebecca and told her he was taking the kids. She shouldn't come home tonight. He'd have her things packed and ready tomorrow. Rebecca's face went white. She grabbed my arm hard enough to hurt and her fingers dug into my skin. She begged me to tell Craig this was all a mistake. A misunderstanding. That I was just trying to hurt her because of the cake. She said I was lying about the texts. That I'd somehow faked them. I pulled my arm away from her grip. I could feel where her nails had pressed into my skin. I told her I didn't write those messages. She did. I didn't take those photos. She did. I didn't destroy her marriage. She did that all by herself. Rebecca's legs seemed to give out and she grabbed onto a nearby chair. Tommy tried to steady her, but she pushed him away. She was sobbing so hard she could barely breathe, making these awful gasping sounds. Craig's brother handed the phone back and said he'd sent everything. Craig nodded and started walking toward the door. Rebecca screamed his name. He didn't turn around. He just kept walking until he disappeared into the hallway. The wedding coordinator appeared next to me and spoke quietly. She said maybe we should move everyone to the dining room. We could still have dinner and try to salvage some part of the reception. Her voice was kind, but I could hear the awkwardness in it. Most of the guests started filing out toward the other room. They moved quickly like they couldn't wait to escape. Some people stared at Rebecca as they passed. Others looked away. Rebecca stayed slumped in her chair crying. A few of her friends went over to her, but she waved them away. Tommy took my hand and we walked toward the sweetheart table in the dining room. His hand was shaking in mine. Actually shaking. I looked at his face and saw he was torn apart. He'd just married me an hour ago. Now his sister's life was falling apart, and he didn't know what to do. We sat down at our table and someone brought us plates of food. The room buzzed with whispered conversations. Everyone trying to process what they'd just seen. The dinner was the most awkward thing I'd ever experienced. People made toasts like nothing had happened. Glasses clinked. Someone laughed too loud at a joke. But everyone kept glancing toward the doorway to the other room. We could hear Rebecca's voice, still arguing, still crying. Hear Craig's brother's voice responding. Couldn't make out the words, but the tone was clear. My parents sat at a table near us looking worried. My mom kept catching my eye and making concerned faces. She leaned over during a lull in the noise and asked if I was okay. I didn't know how to answer that. I felt satisfied that Rebecca had finally faced consequences. Felt guilty about Craig's devastated face. Felt vindicated that everyone saw what she'd done to my cake. Felt terrible about those kids. All of it swirled together in my stomach until I couldn't eat. Tommy squeezed my hand under the table but didn't say anything. What could he say? His sister had just imploded in front of 70 people at our wedding. Tommy's mother appeared at our table about halfway through dinner. She leaned down between us and spoke quietly to Tommy. She said Craig had left with the kids. Rebecca was having a complete breakdown in the other room. Could we please come talk to her? She needed her family right now. Tommy looked at me. I shook my head before he could even ask. I told his mother that Rebecca made her choices. She chose to destroy my cake. She chose to have an affair. She chose to write those texts and take those photos. I wasn't spending my wedding night comforting the woman who'd tried to ruin it. Tommy's mother's face got tight. She said Rebecca was still family. Still Tommy's sister. Still her daughter. I said I understood that, but my answer was still no. She straightened up and walked away without another word. Tommy let out a long breath. He said he was sorry. I told him he didn't need to apologize for his sister's actions, but I could see the guilt on his face anyway. The reception ended way earlier than planned. Guests started leaving as soon as they finished eating. Several people came up to hug me on their way out. They whispered that Rebecca got what she deserved, that I was right to expose her, that someone needed to stand up to her finally, but their words felt empty, hollow. I kept seeing Craig's face when he read those texts, the way his hands shook, the break in his voice. Rebecca had done terrible things, but watching someone's marriage end in real time wasn't satisfying the way I thought it would be. Tommy and I left through a side door to avoid the main hall where Rebecca was still crying. We got to our hotel room that was supposed to be for our wedding night. There were rose petals on the bed, champagne in a bucket, a card from the hotel congratulating us. Tommy sat on the edge of the bed and put his head in his hands. I sat next to him. We ended up talking for hours. About what happened. About his sister. About his family. About what this meant for us. We were supposed to be celebrating. Instead, we were processing a family crisis. By the time we finally went to sleep, it was almost dawn. We hadn't touched the champagne. My phone rang early the next morning. Tommy answered it because I was still half asleep. I heard his mother's voice coming through the speaker, high and upset. He sat up fast and I knew something else had happened. When he hung up, he told me Rebecca had tried to show up at Craig's brother's house where Craig was staying with the kids. Craig's brother wouldn't let her in. She'd started banging on the door and screaming. The neighbors called the police. She was detained but not arrested. Just told to leave and stay away. We were supposed to leave for our honeymoon in Mexico that morning. Our flight was in 4 hours. Tommy looked at me with this exhausted, guilty expression. He said maybe we should postpone. Just for a couple days. Let him help sort out this immediate mess. I wanted to say no. Wanted to say Rebecca shouldn't get to control our honeymoon too. But I looked at his face and knew he couldn't enjoy Mexico while his family was imploding. I agreed we could postpone 2 days. Even though part of me was angry that Rebecca was still dictating our lives even after everything. Tommy left to meet his mother and Craig at his parents' house. They needed to discuss what to do about Rebecca, where she could stay, how to handle the kids. I went back to our apartment alone, the place we just moved into together last month. I walked in and saw my wedding dress hanging on the closet door, the one Rebecca had mocked. I thought about my cake. 5 tiers that Mrs. Yoon had spent weeks creating, the sugar flowers she'd made by hand, all destroyed, smashed, written on. I thought about my reception that ended early with everyone whispering and staring, my wedding that would forever be remembered as the day Rebecca's affair got exposed. Not as the day Tommy and I got married, not as our special day, as the day everything fell apart. I sat on our couch and started crying. Really crying. Not the angry tears from last night, but deep sobs that came from somewhere in my chest. My best friend showed up 20 minutes later. Tommy must have texted her. She held me while I cried about my destroyed cake and my ruined reception. She kept saying I'd had every right to expose Rebecca, that Rebecca deserved what happened. But I couldn't stop thinking about Craig's face, about those kids who were too young to understand why their mom couldn't come home. Tommy came back that evening looking like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were red, his shoulders slumped. He sat next to me on the couch and explained everything. Craig had already talked to a divorce lawyer that morning, was filing papers immediately, citing adultery and asking for full custody. Rebecca had been staying with a friend because Tommy's mother wouldn't let her come to their house. His mother was devastated, kept crying and asking how this happened. Then Tommy told me his mother was upset with me. She'd said I could have told Craig about the affair privately, that I didn't need to expose everything so publicly at the wedding, that I'd humiliated Rebecca in front of everyone. I felt my anger flare up hot in my chest. I asked Tommy if his mother remembered that Rebecca destroyed my wedding cake publicly, that she'd worn white to my wedding, that she'd spent months trying to control and undermine me. Tommy said yes, his mother knew all that, but she was struggling to accept that her daughter had done something this bad. It was easier to be mad at me. I stood up and paced across the room. I said I wasn't going to be the villain in this story. Rebecca made her choices. She had the affair. She destroyed my cake. She wrote those texts. All I did was tell the truth. Tommy nodded and said he knew. He agreed with me. But his family was falling apart, and he didn't know how to fix it. 2 days later, we packed our bags and flew to Mexico anyway. Tommy kept checking his phone during the flight, and I could see the stress in his shoulders. We landed in Cancun and took a taxi to our resort, and the place was beautiful. White sand beaches, clear blue water, palm trees everywhere. Our room had a balcony overlooking the ocean. But Tommy's phone started ringing before we even unpacked, his mother calling to update him on Rebecca. She was staying with a friend now. Craig had changed the locks. The kids kept asking when Mommy was coming home. Tommy paced on the balcony while talking to her, and I sat on the bed staring at my suitcase. This was supposed to be our honeymoon, our special time together. Instead, we were dealing with his sister's mess from another country. The next morning, we tried to enjoy the beach. We swam in the ocean and laid on chairs under an umbrella. But Tommy's phone rang again. Rebecca this time. I could hear her crying through the speaker even though he held it to his ear. She begged him to talk to Craig, to convince him to give her another chance. Tommy told her he couldn't do that. She cried harder and said she made a mistake and everyone was abandoning her. He hung up looking sick. That afternoon, we went snorkeling and it was amazing. Colorful fish everywhere. Coral reefs, clear, warm water. For an hour, I forgot about everything. But when we got back to shore, Tommy had 6 missed calls. 3 from his mother, 2 from Rebecca, one from his younger brother. We spent the evening in our room while he called everyone back. I ordered room service and ate alone on the balcony while he dealt with his family. The third day was better. We took a boat tour to some ruins and walked around ancient Mayan temples. The guide told stories about the civilization that built them. Tommy held my hand and seemed more relaxed. We had lunch at a little restaurant and talked about our future, where we wanted to live long-term, whether we wanted kids, normal newlywed stuff. Then his phone rang again. His mother. Rebecca had shown up at their house crying. His dad let her in. She stayed for dinner. Tommy's mother thought this was progress. Healing. She asked when Tommy and I would be ready to see Rebecca and start repairing the family. Tommy said he didn't know. His mother got quiet and said she hoped we weren't going to hold this grudge forever. On the fourth day, we were eating breakfast by the pool when Tommy got another call. His mother again. She sounded upset. Rebecca had shown up at their house again last night. Hysterical this time. Antonio had blocked her number, deleted all his social media, disappeared completely. He'd realized the affair was exposed and wanted nothing to do with the consequences. Rebecca was devastated. She'd thought Antonio loved her, thought they had a future. Now she had nothing. No husband, no boyfriend, limited access to her kids. Tommy listened and made sympathetic noises. Then his mother said something that made his face go hard. He put her on speaker. Her voice came through shaky and upset. She said maybe if I hadn't exposed everything so dramatically at the wedding, Rebecca and Antonio could have worked things out properly. Maybe Rebecca could have ended her marriage with dignity. Maybe the kids wouldn't be so traumatized. Maybe everything wouldn't be so public and humiliating. I felt heat rush through my body. My hands started shaking. Tommy tried to interrupt, but his mother kept going. She said she understood I was hurt about the cake, but did I really need to destroy Rebecca's entire life over it? I grabbed the phone from Tommy, told his mother that I didn't create Rebecca's affair, didn't make her destroy my wedding cake, didn't force her to betray her husband and children. Rebecca made every single choice that led to this moment. She chose to have an affair. She chose to use Craig's money for her trips. She chose to lie to her family. She chose to destroy my cake at my wedding. All I did was tell the truth. Tommy's mother started crying, said I was being cruel, that Rebecca was her daughter and she was falling apart. I said Rebecca should have thought about consequences before she acted. Tommy took the phone back. His voice was firm when he spoke. He told his mother he loved his sister, but she made her choices, that he wouldn't let his mother blame his wife for Rebecca facing the results of her own actions, that we were on our honeymoon and needed space from this drama. His mother said something I couldn't hear. Tommy said he'd call her when we got home and hung up. We sat by the pool in silence. My hands were still shaking. Tommy reached over and held one. Said he was sorry, that his mother was wrong, that I didn't do anything wrong, but his eyes looked tired. We spent the rest of the honeymoon trying to enjoy Mexico, but the family drama followed us everywhere. Every meal interrupted by calls. Every excursion cut short by texts. Every romantic moment broken by his phone buzzing. We flew home a week later and I felt exhausted. Not relaxed, not refreshed. Exhausted. Tommy's brother picked us up from the airport. He filled us in on everything during the drive. The wedding had become the talk of the entire extended family. Aunts and uncles and cousins all taking sides. Some thought I was justified. Others thought I was cruel. Tommy's aunt had called me vindictive in the family group chat. Said I could have handled it privately. Tommy's cousin had messaged me directly saying she was glad someone finally stood up to Rebecca's bullying. The family was split down the middle. Tommy and I got home to our apartment, and I realized this rift was going to define family gatherings for years. Maybe forever. 2 weeks after we got back, Craig's lawyer called me. Asked if I would provide the security footage of Rebecca destroying the cake. Said it would help establish her character and pattern of behavior for the divorce proceedings. I said yes immediately. Tommy was sitting next to me and nodded his agreement. The lawyer thanked me and said he'd send the paperwork. An hour later, Tommy's mother called him crying. Said I was actively trying to destroy Rebecca's life now. That providing that footage was vindictive and unnecessary. That I should let Rebecca and Craig work things out without my interference. Tommy told her the footage showed the truth. That Rebecca destroyed my property deliberately. That it was evidence of her behavior. His mother hung up on him. A few days later, Tommy told me Craig had officially filed for divorce. Cited adultery. Requested primary custody of the kids. Rebecca hired an expensive lawyer. Tommy found out she used a credit card Craig didn't know about. Racked up $15,000 in charges already. Rebecca was also telling people she only had the affair because Craig was emotionally distant. That he worked too much. Didn't pay attention to her. She was rewriting the whole story to make herself the victim, and Craig the villain. I went back to work the following Monday. Several teacher friends asked about the wedding right away. I gave them a short version. Said there was drama with my sister-in-law. They pressed for details. By Wednesday, the whole school knew. Teachers I barely spoke to were stopping me in the hallway with questions. The lunch ladies asked if it was true my sister-in-law destroyed my cake. My principal called me into her office Friday afternoon. Asked if I was okay. Said she'd heard about what happened. Then mentioned that workplace drama should stay private. I stared at her. Told her this happened at my personal wedding, not at work. She nodded but looked uncomfortable. Said she just wanted to make sure it wasn't affecting my teaching. 3 weeks after the wedding, I was scrolling through social media and saw Rebecca had posted something. A quote about betrayal, about people kicking you when you're down, about true colors showing in hard times, comments from her friends saying they were sorry she was going through something, asking if she was okay, offering support. None of them knew what really happened. Several people who weren't at the wedding messaged me asking what was going on. I sent them the security footage. Every single one. Watched them watch Rebecca deliberately destroy my cake, write oops in the frosting, smile at her work. Their responses were all similar. Shock, disgust, apologies for not knowing the truth. 2 days later, Rebecca's posts were gone. Her account set to private. Tommy told me she'd called him screaming. Said I was turning everyone against her. That wedding guests were commenting on her posts with the truth about the affair and the cake. That her friends were messaging her asking if it was true. That everyone was choosing my side. Tommy reminded her she did this to herself. She hung up on him. 1 month after the wedding, Tommy brought up his birthday. Said he wanted to have dinner with family. Then said maybe we should invite Rebecca. Try to start healing the family rift. I looked at him like he'd lost his mind. Said absolutely not. I wasn't ready to sit across from her and pretend everything was fine. He said we couldn't avoid her forever. That she was his sister. That family was important. I said she destroyed my wedding cake and her marriage exploded at my reception. That I needed more time. He said I was being unforgiving. That I was making the situation worse by refusing to move forward. I felt anger spike in my chest. Asked him if he was seriously blaming me for not wanting to have dinner with the woman who deliberately ruined my wedding. He said he wasn't blaming me, but we needed to think about the whole family. About his parents. About healing. I told him I wasn't ready, and that was final. He slept on the couch that night. The next morning, I packed a bag while Tommy got ready for work. He watched me from the doorway but didn't say anything. I called my friend Sarah and asked if I could stay with her for a few days. She said yes immediately. I left before Tommy did. Drove to Sarah's apartment across town and sat on her couch trying to figure out what I'd gotten myself into. Sarah made coffee and listened while I explained everything. The fight. Tommy wanting Rebecca at his birthday. His accusation that I was being unforgiving. She didn't offer advice, just let me talk. I stayed there 2 days. Went to work from her place. Avoided Tommy's calls the first day. Answered on the second day but kept it short. Told him I needed time to think. He sounded tired. Said he understood. On the third morning, Tommy showed up at Sarah's apartment before I left for work. He looked terrible. Dark circles under his eyes. Wrinkled shirt. He apologized right there in Sarah's doorway. Said he was wrong to push me about Rebecca. That I needed time and he wouldn't bring it up again until I was ready. That his sister's mess wasn't my responsibility to fix. I went home with him. We didn't talk much that day, but things felt better. Like we were on the same team again. 6 weeks after the wedding, I was at the grocery store loading vegetables into my cart when someone said my name. I turned around and saw a woman I recognized from Rebecca's social media. Her name was Jennifer. She'd been at the wedding. One of Rebecca's close friends. She looked uncomfortable. Asked if she could talk to me for a minute. I said sure. We moved to the side of the produce section. Jennifer told me she wanted me to know that she and most of Rebecca's friend group had cut ties with her. That once they learned the full truth about the affair and the cake, they couldn't be associated with someone like that. I asked what she meant by full truth. Jennifer said Rebecca had been telling people a very different version of events, claiming the cake destruction was an accident, that I'd exposed her affair out of spite over wedding planning disagreements. But too many wedding guests had seen the security footage, knew what really happened. Jennifer said Rebecca had been calling people crying, saying she was abandoned when she needed support most. But nobody wanted anything to do with her. The betrayal was too much. Jennifer apologized for not seeing Rebecca's true character sooner. I thanked her and we went our separate ways. I finished my shopping feeling strange, satisfied that people knew the truth, but also unsettled by how completely Rebecca's life was falling apart. Tommy came home from work that evening and told me he'd talked to his mother. She'd mentioned that Rebecca lost a major client at her marketing job. Apparently, the client's wife had heard about the affair through mutual friends, demanded that someone else handle their account. Rebecca's boss had reassigned it. Tommy said Rebecca was struggling financially now, paying for her own apartment, paying for the expensive divorce lawyer she'd hired. Her income had taken a hit with the lost client. I felt a small twist of guilt in my stomach. Asked Tommy if he thought this was my fault. He shook his head. Reminded me that Rebecca chose to have an affair, chose to destroy my wedding cake. These were natural consequences of her choices, not punishments I was inflicting. I knew he was right, but it still felt heavy, like I'd set something in motion that was bigger than I intended. Tommy ordered takeout and we ate dinner watching TV, trying to have one normal evening that wasn't about his sister. 2 weeks later, I got a call from a lawyer's office. Craig's lawyer wanted to depose me about the wedding incident. I agreed to come in. Tommy took the afternoon off work to come with me. The lawyer's office was downtown. Glass and steel building. Conference room with a long table. Craig's lawyer was a woman in her 50s, professional, kind. She asked me to describe exactly what happened at the wedding. I told her everything. Finding the destroyed cake, the security footage showing Rebecca deliberately pushing each tier, the text messages from Antonio. exposing the affair in front of everyone. She recorded my testimony, asked specific questions about Rebecca's behavior, her pattern of manipulation and control. Then Rebecca's lawyer called in on video conference. A man in an expensive suit. He tried to paint me as vindictive, suggested I'd orchestrated the public exposure deliberately to humiliate Rebecca, that I could have told Craig privately. I stayed calm, told him I'd kept quiet about Antonio's text all day, only spoke up after Rebecca destroyed my cake and lied about it, that she'd chosen to betray her husband and destroy my wedding. The consequences were hers to own. Rebecca's lawyer pulled up the security footage, watched Rebecca smile while writing oops in my cake's frosting. He didn't have much to say after that. The deposition ended. Craig's lawyer thanked me, said my testimony would be helpful. Tommy and I left. He squeezed my hand in the elevator, told me I'd done well, that I'd just told the truth. 2 months after the wedding, Tommy's mother called, asked if we'd come to Sunday dinner, said Rebecca wouldn't be there. I'd been avoiding family gatherings, but I missed Tommy's dad, missed his younger brother. I agreed to go. We showed up at their house that Sunday. The table was set for 5 instead of the usual 7. Rebecca's empty chair felt like a ghost. Her kids' empty chairs even worse. Tommy's dad hugged me. His younger brother gave me a fist bump. Tommy's mother was polite but stiff. Dinner was pot roast. We ate and made small talk. Tommy's brother talked about college classes. His dad mentioned work. Then Tommy's mother started making comments about how family should stick together, how forgiveness was important, how holding grudges only hurt everyone. She never said my name, but every comment was aimed at me. I could feel it. Tommy's dad tried to change the subject a few times. Didn't work. By dessert, I was ready to leave. Tommy's mother brought out pie. Said something about how families need to heal. That loyalty meant supporting each other through mistakes. I ate my pie and didn't respond. Let her words bounce off me. After dinner, Tommy's dad asked if I'd help him in the garage. Said he needed a hand moving some boxes. I followed him out. He closed the garage door behind us, turned to me and apologized. Said his wife was wrong to make those comments, that I'd done the right thing exposing Rebecca, that his daughter had needed to face real consequences for once. He said he and Tommy's mother had enabled Rebecca's entitled behavior her whole life, always made excuses, always smoothed things over, let her treat people badly without accountability. He thought maybe this crisis would force her to grow up, face her issues. But he didn't sound convinced. His voice was sad, tired. He asked me to be patient with his wife, said she was struggling with seeing Rebecca suffer, even though Rebecca had brought it on herself. I told him I understood, that I knew this was hard for everyone. He hugged me. We went back inside, left shortly after. Tommy held my hand the whole drive home. 3 days later, I got an email from Rebecca. The subject line said, "Please read." I stared at it for 10 minutes, knew I shouldn't open it. Did anyway. It was long. Several paragraphs. She apologized for destroying the cake, said she'd been having a mental health crisis, that her marriage to Craig had been unhappy for years, that he was emotionally distant, never home, didn't appreciate her. She said the affair with Antonio was wrong, but she'd been desperate for affection, for someone to see her. Then she said I'd ruined her entire life over one mistake made in a moment of poor judgment, that I could have handled it privately, that exposing everything publicly had cost her everything. Her marriage, her kids, her friends, her reputation, her job. She said she hoped I was happy with what I'd done, that I'd gotten my revenge. I closed the email, felt anger rise in my chest. One mistake. Like the months of affair didn't count. Like deliberately destroying my wedding cake was just a little oops. Like I was supposed to protect her from consequences. I deleted the email. Didn't respond. 5 days after the email, Tommy's mother showed up at our apartment. Didn't call first, just knocked on the door. I answered. She asked to come in. I let her. We sat in the living room. She started talking immediately. Said she needed me to understand what my actions had done to Rebecca's children. That they were confused. Hurting. Didn't understand why their mother was falling apart. Why their family was broken. She said the kids asked about me. About why I hated their mother. I felt my jaw tighten. Told her Rebecca should have considered her children before having an affair. Before destroying my wedding. That I wasn't responsible for fixing the mess Rebecca created. Tommy's mother's face got red. She said I was being cruel. That a good person would show mercy. Would help Rebecca reconcile with Craig for the children's sake. I stood up. Asked her why Rebecca's actions were always excused while I was expected to be perfect. Why I was supposed to fix everything when I hadn't done anything wrong. She stood too. Said I was making everything worse. That I was tearing the family apart. The conversation got louder. Tommy's mother said I was being selfish. Vindictive. That I cared more about being right than about innocent children suffering. I told her those children were suffering because their mother cheated and lied. Not because I told the truth. She said a good wife would convince Tommy to help his sister. Would put family first. I said I was putting my husband first. My marriage first. That Rebecca had tried to control and undermine me from day one. That she'd destroyed my wedding deliberately. That she'd betrayed her entire family. Tommy's mother called me cruel. Said I had no compassion. That someday I'd understand what it meant to watch your child suffer. I told her to leave. She said Tommy needed to decide where his loyalties lay, with his wife or with his family. I opened the door. She left. I called Tommy at work, told him what happened. He came home early. Tommy found me sitting on the couch. I'd been crying, angry crying. He sat next to me, put his arm around me, said his mother was wrong, that his loyalty was with me, that I wasn't responsible for his sister's consequences, that his mother had no right to come to our home and attack me. He called his mother. I could hear her voice through the phone, loud, upset. Tommy stayed calm, told her she couldn't blame me for Rebecca's choices, that she needed to stop, that he wouldn't let her make me the villain. She said something about family. Tommy said I was his family now, that she needed to respect that. He hung up, looked exhausted. I noticed then how much weight he'd lost, how tired he looked all the time. The stress of mediating between his mother and his sister and me was wearing him down. I could see it in his face, in the way his shoulders slumped, in how he rubbed his temples. We'd been married 2 months and his family was already putting this much strain on us. I worried about what it was doing to our marriage, whether we'd survive this, whether love was enough when family kept pulling us apart. Tommy leaned his head back against the couch, closed his eyes. I took his hand. We sat there in silence, both of us tired, both of us wondering how much more we could take. 3 months after the wedding, I sat in a courthouse waiting room with sweaty palms and a racing heart. The custody hearing had finally arrived. Tommy squeezed my hand as we waited for my name to be called. Craig's lawyer had explained what to expect. Simple questions about what I witnessed, about Rebecca's behavior, about the wedding. I'd been dreading this for weeks. The bailiff opened the courtroom door and called my name. I stood up. My legs felt shaky. Walked to the witness stand. Raised my right hand. Swore to tell the truth. Sat down in the wooden chair. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Craig sat at one table with his lawyer. Rebecca sat at another table with hers. She stared at me with pure hatred in her eyes. Not sadness, not regret. Just burning anger like this was all my fault. Tommy's mother sat in the gallery behind Rebecca, also glaring. Craig's lawyer approached me, asked me to state my name and relationship to the parties. I answered. Then he asked about the wedding. I described finding the cake destroyed, the frosting everywhere, the word written in the mess. My voice stayed steady even though my hands trembled. He asked if I knew who did it. I said yes. Explained about the security footage, about watching Rebecca deliberately push each tear, about her writing that word with her finger, about her smile. Rebecca's lawyer jumped up, objected, said this was hearsay. The judge asked if I personally viewed the footage. I said yes, multiple times. He allowed it. Craig's lawyer asked about Rebecca's behavior before the wedding. I described the engagement party takeover, the dress shop incident, the constant attempts to control everything, her pattern of entitled behavior, how she wore white to my wedding, how she'd told people I was embarrassing the family. Rebecca's face got redder with each answer. Her lawyer kept objecting. The judge kept overruling. Then Craig's lawyer asked about Rebecca's character regarding her children. I paused, chose my words carefully, said I'd witnessed her prioritize her own desires over her family's needs, that she'd lied to her husband repeatedly, that she'd used family money for an affair while Craig watched their kids. Rebecca's lawyer shot up again, started yelling about relevance. The judge told him to sit down, said character evidence was absolutely relevant in custody cases. Craig's lawyer thanked me, returned to his seat. Rebecca's lawyer stood up, approached me with a folder, asked if I had a personal vendetta against his client. I said no. He asked why I exposed the affair at the wedding instead of privately. I explained I didn't plan it, that Rebecca destroyed my cake first, that the moment presented itself and I took it. He suggested I was bitter and jealous, that I wanted to hurt Rebecca. I stayed calm, said I simply told the truth when asked. He pulled out printed social media posts, my posts, asked if I'd been posting about the wedding drama online. I said no. He showed me posts from my friends talking about it, asked if I encouraged them. I said I couldn't control what my friends posted. He asked if I sent people the security footage. I admitted I had. When Rebecca's friends asked what happened, he acted like this proved I was on a campaign to destroy her. I pointed out the footage just showed the truth, what Rebecca actually did. He asked if I felt guilty about Rebecca losing everything, her marriage, her reputation, her standing in the community. I said Rebecca lost those things because of her own choices, not because of me. He raised his voice, asked if I enjoyed watching her suffer. The judge interrupted, told him to stop badgering the witness. Rebecca's lawyer tried a different approach, asked about my relationship with Craig, if we'd communicated privately. I explained Craig had texted me asking about the affair before the wedding, that I hadn't known anything then. He suggested Craig and I had conspired together. I said no, that was ridiculous. He had no more questions, sat down looking frustrated. Craig's lawyer stood for redirect, asked if he could present evidence. The judge nodded. He pulled out a laptop, set it up facing the judge, played the security footage. The courtroom went silent. You could hear every sound. Rebecca walking into the reception hall, looking around, picking up the serving knife, pushing the first tier, then the second, third, fourth, fifth. taking her finger, writing in the frosting. That satisfied smile. The footage was even worse watching it in the quiet courtroom. The judge's face changed as he watched. His mouth got tight. His eyes narrowed. He looked disgusted. Genuinely disgusted. Then Craig's lawyer played a second video. Text message screenshots scrolling on screen. Months of messages between Rebecca and someone named Antonio. Plans for trips, pictures, love messages, details about using Craig's money. Messages about lying to Craig, about the kids being at their dad's house so she could sneak away. The judge watched it all. His expression got darker with each screen. When it finished, he asked if this evidence had been authenticated. Craig's lawyer confirmed it had. Phone records, credit card statements, hotel receipts, everything verified. The judge thanked me for my testimony, dismissed me from the stand. I walked back to the gallery on shaking legs, sat next to Tommy. He put his arm around me. Rebecca wouldn't look at me now, just stared straight ahead. Her lawyer whispered something to her. She shook her head. The judge called a 15-minute break. I headed to the bathroom. Needed to splash cold water on my face. Calm my nerves. I pushed open the door, walked to the sink, started running the water. The door opened behind me. Rebecca walked in. We were alone. She walked right up to me. Her face was red, eyes wild. She started talking fast. Said she hoped I was happy, that I'd destroyed her relationship with her children, that I'd ruined everything. I turned off the water, looked at her, told her she destroyed her own relationship, that she chose an affair over her family, that she lied to everyone. She stepped closer, said I didn't understand, that her marriage was already broken, that Craig was distant, that she'd been unhappy for years. I said that didn't excuse what she did. She could have gotten divorced, could have been honest. Instead, she betrayed everyone and destroyed my wedding out of spite. Her face twisted. She said I was a spoiled brat who couldn't handle not being the center of attention, that I deliberately humiliated her in front of everyone, that I was vindictive and cruel. I stayed calm, said she humiliated herself, that I just told the truth. She raised her hand, slapped me hard across the face. The sound echoed in the bathroom. My cheek burned. I stood there shocked. Before I could react, the bathroom door opened. Rebecca's lawyer rushed in, must have followed her. He grabbed Rebecca's arm, pulled her away from me, started talking fast and quiet. Something about making things worse, about the judge. Rebecca jerked away from him, pointed at me, said I'd been systematically destroying her life, that she finally snapped. Her lawyer kept pulling her toward the door. She left still yelling. I touched my cheek. It felt hot, probably bright red. I walked out of the bathroom, found Tommy in the hallway. His eyes went wide when he saw my face, asked what happened. I told him. His expression changed, went from concern to furious in seconds. He started toward the courtroom. I grabbed his arm, told him to wait. We found a courthouse security officer instead. I explained what happened. He took us to a small office, called a supervisor. They took photos of my face, the red mark, wrote up a report, asked if I wanted to press charges. I said yes, without hesitation. The supervisor explained it would be battery, a misdemeanor, but it would go on Rebecca's record, would likely impact the custody case. I didn't care. She'd assaulted me. There had to be consequences. They gave me paperwork, a case number, said an officer would follow up. Tommy held my hand the whole time, kept apologizing, said his sister had gone too far, that he couldn't believe she'd actually hit me. We went back to the courtroom. Rebecca sat at her table. Her lawyer looked stressed, kept running his hand through his hair. The bailiff called everyone to order. The judge came back in, looked at me, at my red cheek. His eyes narrowed, asked if something happened during the break. Craig's lawyer stood, explained that Rebecca had assaulted me in the bathroom, that we'd filed a police report, that there was a witness. Rebecca's lawyer tried to object, said it was a private matter. The judge cut him off, said assault during a custody hearing was absolutely relevant, asked Rebecca to stand. She stood slowly. He asked if she struck the witness. Rebecca's lawyer whispered to her. She admitted it, said she'd lost control, that I'd provoked her. The judge's face hardened. He said nothing I could have said justified violence, that her inability to control her temper was deeply concerning given the custody matter at hand. Rebecca started crying. Her lawyer put his hand on her shoulder. The judge said he'd take the assault into account in his decision. Court was adjourned until the next morning. That night, Tommy's phone rang. His mother. He put it on speaker. She started yelling immediately, said terrible things about me, that I was destroying Rebecca's life, that I wouldn't be satisfied until Rebecca had nothing left, that I was tearing the family apart, that a good person would show mercy. Tommy tried to interrupt. She kept going, said I was vindictive, cruel, that I cared more about being right than about Rebecca's children, about innocent kids who needed their mother. Tommy's voice got firm, told his mother to stop, that Rebecca lost custody because of her own actions, because she had an affair, because she destroyed property, because she assaulted someone. His mother said I could have handled things differently, could have been kind, could have helped Rebecca instead of making everything worse. Tommy said I didn't make anything worse, that I just told the truth, that his sister made her own choices. His mother's voice broke, Said she couldn't watch her daughter suffer like this, that she needed space from both of us, that she couldn't be around me. Tommy said he understood, that he was sorry she felt that way, but that his loyalty was with his wife. His mother hung up. Tommy sat there staring at his phone. I could see the pain on his face. He'd just lost his mother's support. Because of me. Because he chose me. I felt sick about it even though I knew he was right. The next morning, we returned to the courthouse. The judge gave his decision. Craig received primary custody. Rebecca got supervised visitation every other weekend. The judge cited multiple factors. The affair showing poor judgment. The destruction of property showing vindictive behavior. The assault showing inability to control anger. The pattern of lying and manipulation. He said Rebecca was not currently fit for equal custody. That the children's safety and stability had to come first. That supervised visitation would continue until Rebecca demonstrated sustained behavior change through therapy and compliance. Rebecca collapsed. Just fell forward onto the table sobbing. Her lawyer tried to comfort her. Craig sat very still. His face showed relief, and sadness, and exhaustion. I watched Rebecca fall apart. Watched her whole body shake with sobs. Heard her gasping for air. Even though I knew this was the right decision. Even though those kids needed stability. Even though Rebecca had brought this on herself. I felt sick. Actually physically sick. Watching someone's life completely fall apart. Even someone who'd hurt me. It didn't feel good. It felt horrible. 4 months after the wedding, Tommy and I sat in a therapist's office. The stress of his family situation was breaking us. We'd been fighting more, sleeping less. Tommy seemed depressed. I felt constantly anxious. We needed help. The therapist was older. Calm voice. She asked us to explain what brought us in. We told her everything. The wedding, the affair, the custody battle, the family division, his mother's rejection. She listened without interrupting. Then she asked what we wanted from therapy. Tommy said he wanted to stop feeling torn between me and his family. I said I wanted to stop feeling guilty for telling the truth. She nodded. Said those were good goals. She explained that we couldn't control his family's reactions, only our own responses, our commitment to each other. She helped us establish boundaries, what we would and wouldn't accept from his family, how to support each other when his mother or sister pushed back, how to communicate when the stress got overwhelming. We left feeling lighter, not fixed, but like we had tools now, like we weren't just drowning anymore. I heard through a mutual friend that Rebecca had started therapy. Real therapy. Not just for the custody evaluations, actually working on her behavior patterns, her entitlement issues. The friend said Rebecca was taking it seriously, showing up every week, doing the homework. Part of me hoped this meant real change, that maybe Rebecca would actually grow from this. But I was skeptical. She'd manipulated people her whole life, played victim, avoided responsibility. Could therapy really change someone that fundamentally? Or was this just another performance? Another way to look good for the court? I didn't know. Didn't trust it. But some small part of me hoped it was real. Craig called me one afternoon. Asked if we could meet for coffee. I agreed. We met at a quiet place downtown. He looked better than at the courthouse. Less exhausted. He thanked me for my testimony. Said it made a difference. That the judge had taken it seriously. Then he told me his kids were doing better. More stable. Less anxious. His oldest had told him something that stuck with me. Said they'd been scared of their mother's angry outbursts. That they felt safer at his place. That they didn't have to walk on eggshells anymore. Hearing that reinforced everything. The custody decision was right. Those kids needed stability. Needed to feel safe. Even though it was painful. Even though Rebecca was suffering. Her children's safety came first. 5 months after the wedding, I was eating lunch in my classroom. Grading papers. A woman walked in. I looked up. Rebecca. My heart jumped. She wasn't supposed to be here. School had security. She walked toward my desk. Started talking fast. Said she needed my help, that I had to talk to Craig about giving her more custody time. That her therapist believed she was making progress. That the supervised visitation was humiliating. That it was damaging her relationship with her children. I stood up. Told her she needed to leave. That I had no influence over Craig's custody decisions. She kept talking. Said she knew she'd been terrible to me. That she'd lost everything. Her marriage, her kids, her reputation. That she just wanted a chance to be a mother. Despite everything. Despite the cake. Despite the slap. Despite all of it. I felt a flicker of sympathy. Watching her beg. Seeing how completely her life had fallen apart. But I pushed it away. Told her again to leave my workplace. She started crying. Said please. Just please talk to Craig. I walked to my classroom door. Opened it. Called for security. 2 security guards walked through my classroom door within a minute. Rebecca turned to them and started talking fast about how this was all a misunderstanding. That she just needed to speak with me for a moment. I told the guards she wasn't supposed to be here and needed to leave. They asked her to come with them. She grabbed her purse and looked at me one more time with tears running down her face. I watched them walk her down the hallway toward the main entrance. My hands were shaking. I sat down at my desk and tried to focus on the stack of papers in front of me, but the words blurred together. 20 minutes later, my principal knocked on my door. She came in and closed it behind her. She asked if I was okay, and I nodded even though I wasn't sure. She told me the woman claimed to be family, but wasn't on my approved visitor list. I explained the situation briefly without going into all the details. My principal's face got serious. She said if Rebecca showed up again, they would file for a restraining order and contact the police immediately. I thanked her, and she squeezed my shoulder before leaving. That evening, I told Tommy about Rebecca coming to my school. He was grading papers at the kitchen table when I got home. I described how she'd gotten past security and cornered me during lunch. His face went red. He stood up and paced across our small living room. He said his sister was out of control, that showing up at my workplace crossed every possible line. I told him about her begging me to talk to Craig about custody. Tommy stopped pacing and looked at me. He said we might need to get a restraining order if she kept this up. I agreed. We spent the rest of the evening on the couch not really watching TV, just sitting close together while Tommy sent angry texts to his mother about Rebecca's behavior. 3 days later, Tommy's father called my cell phone. He asked if we could meet for coffee without Tommy or his mother knowing. I hesitated but agreed. We met at a quiet coffee shop across town the next afternoon. He looked tired, older than I remembered. He stirred sugar into his coffee for a long time before speaking. He told me his wife was struggling badly with depression over everything that had happened, that the family rift was eating her alive. He said Rebecca's situation kept getting worse and his wife blamed herself for not fixing it. Then he asked the question I knew was coming. Was there any path toward reconciliation? Not between me and Rebecca necessarily. Just toward the family being able to gather together again without so much anger and tension. I appreciated his honesty. The fact that he wasn't asking me to pretend to be friends with Rebecca, or forgive everything, just asking if we could exist in the same room. I told Tommy's father the truth, that I didn't know if I could ever have a real relationship with Rebecca after everything she'd done. The cake, the white dress, the constant attempts to control my life, the way she'd shown up at my school. But I also told him I was willing to be civil at family gatherings if Rebecca could respect boundaries and stop playing the victim. If she could accept that we would never be close and stop trying to force something that wasn't there. He looked relieved. He said that was more than he'd hoped for. That he would work on helping his wife understand that civil coexistence was the best anyone could expect right now. Not the close family she dreamed of, but something sustainable. We finished our coffee and he hugged me before we left. Told me he was glad Tommy had married someone with a backbone. 6 months after the wedding, Rebecca's supervised visitation reports came back positive. Tommy showed me the email from Craig's lawyer. The therapist who'd been supervising her visits with the kids wrote that Rebecca had been appropriate every single time. Patient with the children, focused on their needs instead of her own drama. She'd been going to therapy twice a week, actually doing the work according to her counselor. Her lawyer filed a motion to modify custody to unsupervised visitation. Craig didn't fight it. His lawyer told him the judge would probably grant it anyway given the positive reports. I felt something unexpected when Tommy told me. Relief, maybe. Or genuine happiness that Rebecca was getting more time with her kids. I'd spent 6 months being angry at her, watching her life fall apart, but those kids deserved a mother who was trying to be better, even if that mother was Rebecca. Tommy and I hosted a small dinner party 2 weeks later. Just my parents and my brother, 2 couples from our friend group. No family drama, no Rebecca crisis, just normal people having a normal evening together. We made pasta and salad, opened too many bottles of wine, played board games until midnight. My mother pulled me into the kitchen while I was getting dessert. She told me she was proud of how I'd handled everything, that watching me set boundaries and stand up for myself had been amazing to see. I realized I'd been so focused on the family mess that I hadn't stopped to think about my own growth. How I'd gone from the woman who let Rebecca try to plan my entire engagement party to someone who could say no. Who could maintain boundaries even when people cried. Who could be civil without being a doormat. A few days after the dinner party, Tommy's younger brother sent him a text. Asked if he could come visit without it being a whole family thing. Said he missed his brother and didn't want to get caught up in all the drama between their mother and sister. Tommy was so happy. His brother was 22 and they'd always been close before the wedding. We had him over for dinner and game night the following Saturday. We ordered pizza and played video games until 2 in the morning. It felt like such a relief. A piece of normal family connection that wasn't complicated or painful. His brother told us he'd been avoiding family gatherings because his mother kept trying to make him take sides. That he loved Rebecca, but thought what she'd done was wrong. That he was glad Tommy had found someone who made him happy. When he left that night, I felt hopeful for the first time in months. Like maybe the family could heal in small pieces even if it never went back to what it was. 3 weeks later, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line said it was from Rebecca's therapist. I almost deleted it. Almost told Tommy to deal with whatever it was. But something made me open it. Inside was a formal letter from Rebecca. Not asking for anything. Not making excuses. Just taking responsibility. She wrote that she'd destroyed my wedding cake deliberately because she was jealous and angry. That wearing white to my wedding was meant to hurt me. That trying to control all my wedding planning was about her need to feel important and in charge. That the affair with Antonio had been going on for 8 months, and she'd used Craig's money to fund trips and gifts. That the situation exploding at my reception was her own fault for being careless with her phone. The letter was 2 pages long. Every terrible thing she'd done laid out clearly. No justifications, no claims about being stressed or having a bad marriage, just acknowledgement of the harm she'd caused. I read it 3 times, looked for the catch, the manipulation, but it seemed genuine. The first time Rebecca had taken real accountability for anything. That evening, Tommy asked me something I'd been dreading. He wanted to know if I would be willing to attend a family therapy session. Him, me, his parents, and Rebecca. To work on establishing boundaries that would let family gatherings happen again. I didn't want to. The thought of sitting in a room with Rebecca and his mother made my stomach hurt. But I looked at Tommy's face and saw how much the family division was hurting him. How he missed his parents. How he wanted his brother to feel comfortable visiting. I told him I would do it. For him. Not for Rebecca. The therapist called me the next day to explain how the session would work. She promised it would focus on boundaries and expectations. Not on forcing me to forgive Rebecca or pretend everything was fine. Just on creating a structure that would let us exist in the same space without constant conflict. I agreed to come. The family therapy session happened on a Tuesday evening at 7. Tommy and I got there first. Sat on a couch in the waiting room holding hands. His parents arrived next. His mother looked smaller somehow. Tired. She nodded at me but didn't speak. Then Rebecca walked in. She looked different too. Less makeup. Hair pulled back. She sat in a chair across the room and stared at her hands. The therapist called us back to her office. We all found seats. Nobody spoke. The therapist explained the ground rules. 1 person talks at a time. No interrupting. Focus on moving forward, not relitigating the past. Then she asked Rebecca to read something she'd prepared. Rebecca pulled out a piece of paper. Her hands shook. She read a statement apologizing directly to me. Said her behavior had been mean and controlling. That she'd treated me terribly from the day we met because she felt threatened by me. That destroying my cake was cruel and unforgivable. That she'd created the affair situation that exploded at my wedding through her own choices. Her voice broke several times, but she kept reading. When she finished, she folded the paper and looked at me. Tommy's mother spoke next. Said she was sorry for blaming me instead of holding Rebecca accountable. That she'd always made excuses for her daughter's behavior because she wanted to protect her. That she'd enabled Rebecca's worst qualities and that needed to stop. The room was quiet. The therapist asked if I wanted to respond. I said I appreciated the apologies, but that trust would take time to rebuild. That I was willing to be civil at family events but needed clear boundaries about contact and behavior. Everyone agreed. We spent the next hour establishing specific rules. What kinds of contact were okay. How family gatherings would work. What to do if someone crossed a line. By the time we left, I felt exhausted, but also lighter. Like maybe we'd found a path forward that didn't require me to pretend everything was fine, but also didn't mean permanent war. The therapist pulled out a notepad and started writing down the specific rules we all agreed on. Rebecca couldn't text me or call me directly unless there was a genuine family emergency involving Tommy's parents. No showing up at my work or my apartment. At family gatherings, nobody would bring up the wedding or the affair or anything related to those events. We would all act like normal people having normal family dinners, and if someone couldn't handle that, they needed to skip that particular event. The therapist looked at each of us while she read the list back. She explained that these boundaries weren't punishments, but protection for everyone involved. They created space where healing could maybe happen over time, without anyone being forced into closeness they weren't ready for. Rebecca nodded and said she understood. Tommy's mother wiped her eyes but agreed too. I felt something loosen in my chest. Not forgiveness exactly. Just the smallest bit of hope that maybe we could all exist in the same room without everything exploding. We left the therapist's office and went to separate cars. Nobody hugged goodbye. Tommy squeezed my hand in the parking lot and told me he was proud of me. That night, I slept better than I had in months. 7 months after the wedding, Tommy's dad had a birthday. His mother called and asked if we would come to dinner at a restaurant downtown. A neutral place where nobody had home advantage. She mentioned Rebecca would be there too, and I felt my stomach tighten. But I said yes. Tommy and I got there first and sat at the big table they'd reserved. His dad arrived next and hugged us both. His younger brother came with his girlfriend. Then Rebecca walked in with her hair pulled back and wearing a simple dress. She said hello to everyone and sat at the far end of the table from me. The waitress came and took drink orders. Tommy's mother arrived last and kept glancing between me and Rebecca like she expected something to blow up. But nothing did. We ordered food. People talked about work and weather and a movie Tommy's brother had seen. Rebecca answered questions about her job when people asked but mostly stayed quiet. She didn't try to dominate the conversation or make everything about her. When the food came, she ate and participated in small talk about the restaurant's menu. At one point, Tommy's dad told a story about a fishing trip, and everyone laughed, including Rebecca and me at the same time. It felt weird. Not comfortable exactly, but manageable. Like we were all playing our parts in this careful dance of being civil. When dinner ended, we all stood up. Rebecca told her dad happy birthday and hugged him. She nodded at me from across the table. I nodded back. Tommy and I drove home and he said that went better than expected. I agreed. It felt like a tiny victory that we'd gotten through a whole dinner without drama or fighting or anyone storming out. A few days later, Tommy was on the phone with Craig about picking up some tools Craig had borrowed before the divorce started. When he hung up, he looked thoughtful. I asked what they talked about besides tools. Tommy said Craig mentioned he'd started seeing someone. A woman he met at his gym who was also divorced with 2 kids around the same age as his. Craig said his children really liked her and she was patient and kind. He also told Tommy that when the kids mentioned their dad's girlfriend to Rebecca during a visit, she'd apparently gotten upset and called her therapist right away, instead of taking it out on the kids. Her therapist helped her work through her feelings about Craig moving on, and she didn't try to badmouth the new girlfriend to the children, or make them feel guilty for liking her. Tommy said Craig sounded relieved that Rebecca was handling things better. I felt surprised. The old Rebecca would have caused a scene or tried to turn the kids against their dad's new relationship. Maybe therapy was actually helping her become less destructive. 2 weeks later, I went to the farmer's market on Saturday morning to get fresh vegetables. I was looking at tomatoes when someone said my name. I turned around and saw Mrs. Yoon standing there with a basket of peaches. She smiled and asked how I was doing after everything that happened at my wedding. I told her honestly it had been a really hard several months. Things were slowly getting better. The family was learning to be around each other without constant fighting. She nodded and said she was glad to hear it. Then she told me she was glad I stood up for myself that day because people like Rebecca only change when they face real consequences for their behavior. She said she'd seen too many brides let family members walk all over them and ruin their special days without any accountability. Mrs. Yoon squeezed my arm and said I was stronger than I probably realized. We talked for a few more minutes about her bakery and how business was going. Then she had to leave to meet her daughter, but she hugged me first. Walking back to my car with bags of vegetables, I felt grateful that she'd been there that day with her camera. Without that footage, everything would have been different. Tommy and I celebrated our first anniversary in late spring. We'd never gotten a real honeymoon because of all the family drama. So we took a long weekend and drove up to the mountains. We rented a small cabin with a view of pine trees and a lake. No phone service, no internet, just us and the quiet. We hiked during the day and cooked simple meals at night. On our actual anniversary, we sat on the porch watching the sunset. Tommy brought up everything we'd been through over the past year. The destroyed cake, the affair exposure, the custody battle, the family therapy, all of it. He said he knew it wasn't the first year of marriage either of us had imagined. I agreed but told him that going through all of it together had taught us how to communicate when things got hard, how to support each other even when his family was pulling him in different directions, how to set boundaries and stick to them. We'd learned more about being married in 12 difficult months than some couples learn in years of easy times. Tommy pulled me close and said he'd marry me again even knowing everything that would happen. I kissed him and said the same thing. That night felt like the peaceful honeymoon we deserved. Like we'd finally made it through the worst part and could start actually enjoying being married. 8 months after the wedding, Tommy came home from work and told me his mother had called with news about Rebecca. Apparently, Rebecca got promoted at her marketing job. Her boss had noticed how much more professional and reliable she'd become over the past several months. Better at meeting deadlines, more collaborative with coworkers, less dramatic and self-centered. Tommy said his mother was excited about it and hopeful it meant Rebecca was really changing. I felt genuinely happy hearing that. Not because I suddenly liked Rebecca or wanted to be friends with her, but because it suggested the consequences she'd faced had actually pushed her toward real growth, instead of just temporary good behavior to avoid more punishment. People don't usually change unless they hit rock bottom and are forced to look at themselves honestly. Maybe losing her marriage and custody and social circle had finally made Rebecca do that work. The next Sunday, Tommy's mother invited us to dinner at their house. When we arrived, Rebecca was already there helping set the table. She said hello to both of us politely. During dinner, the conversation flowed more easily than it had at the restaurant. Tommy's dad told stories about work. His brother talked about a camping trip he was planning. Tommy's mother asked about my students and seemed genuinely interested in my answers. Rebecca talked about her new responsibilities at work and how challenging but rewarding they were. She asked Tommy about a project he'd mentioned before. Nobody brought up the wedding or the divorce or anything heavy. It almost felt normal, like a regular family dinner where people cared about each other's lives. Rebecca didn't try to dominate every conversation or make subtle digs at anyone. She focused on talking with her dad and brothers and let me have my space. After dinner, she helped clean up and then left without any drama. Driving home, I told Tommy that felt different. Less forced, less like everyone was walking on eggshells. He agreed and said maybe we were finally finding our way to something that worked. I had my regular therapy appointment that week and told my therapist something that surprised me. I said I didn't feel angry at Rebecca anymore. Not the hot, burning anger that had consumed me for months after the wedding. Now it was more like distant wariness, like how you'd feel about someone who'd hurt you badly, but was now far enough away that they couldn't do it again. And underneath that wariness was sadness about what could have been if she'd been a different person. If she'd welcomed me into the family instead of seeing me as a threat. If we could have been friends, or at least friendly. My therapist nodded and said that shift was healthy. She reminded me that letting go of anger didn't mean forgetting what happened or dropping my boundaries. It just meant I was processing the trauma and moving forward instead of staying stuck in rage. She said anger takes a lot of energy to maintain, and now I could use that energy for better things. Like my marriage and my teaching and my own happiness. I left that session feeling lighter. 10 months after the wedding, Tommy told me Craig's divorce was finally done. The settlement gave Craig the house and primary custody of the kids. Rebecca got to see them every other weekend without supervision now that she'd proven herself stable. She kept her retirement accounts and got some other financial assets. Tommy said Rebecca had accepted all the terms without fighting. Her therapist had helped her understand that cooperation and putting the kids first would serve everyone better than dragging things out in court battles. Craig told Tommy he was relieved it was over and could start rebuilding his life. The kids were doing well, adjusting to the new normal. Rebecca was apparently being a better mom during her visits, more present and less focused on herself. Tommy's voice sounded hopeful when he told me all this, like maybe his sister was actually becoming someone better. I felt cautiously optimistic too, but also realistic. People could change, but it took sustained effort over years, not just months. A few weeks later, Tommy's mother called him with more news about Rebecca. She'd started dating someone new, a man she met at her therapy group who was also working on personal growth after his own mistakes had damaged his family. Tommy's mother was excited about it. She said this guy seemed different from Rebecca's previous choices, more grounded, more focused on being a good person than on status or money. She hoped this relationship would be healthier than Rebecca's marriage had been, that Rebecca had learned something from how badly the affair destroyed her life. Tommy told me about it that night, and I said I hoped so too. Not for Rebecca's sake, really, but for her kids' sake. They deserved a mom who was stable and made better choices, and honestly for the whole family's sake because none of us wanted to go through another explosion like the wedding. I felt cautiously optimistic that maybe Rebecca had actually learned from her catastrophic mistakes and their consequences. Time would tell if the growth was real or just another performance. A few weeks later, Tommy suggested we host Thanksgiving at our apartment. He wanted to invite both our families, a chance to show everyone we could all be in the same space without drama. I hesitated at first, but agreed because I could see how much it mattered to him. He called his mother to extend the invitation, and she accepted immediately, clearly relieved we were making this effort. Then Tommy called Rebecca. I could hear his side of the conversation from the kitchen. He told her about Thanksgiving, and there was a long pause. Then he said yes. I was the one who suggested inviting everyone. Another pause. He looked at me and covered the phone. She wants to know if you're really okay with her coming to our home. I thought about it for a second. This was different from a restaurant or his parents' house. This was my space. But I nodded. Tommy told her yes, and they talked logistics for another minute before hanging up. He came into the kitchen and hugged me. That was big of her, he said, asking if you were comfortable instead of just assuming she could come. I agreed. It was the first time Rebecca had actually considered my feelings and boundaries, instead of just doing whatever she wanted. Thanksgiving morning arrived, and I spent hours cooking. Tommy helped with the turkey while I worked on sides. His parents arrived first with wine and rolls. His mother hugged me tight and thanked me for hosting. His father shook Tommy's hand and told us he was proud of how we'd handled everything this year. Rebecca showed up last with her kids. She knocked instead of just walking in like she used to. Tommy opened the door and she stood there holding a nice bottle of wine and a fall flower arrangement. For you, she said to me. Thank you for having us in your home. I took the gifts and told her thank you. The kids ran to hug Tommy and their grandparents. Rebecca stayed in the living room talking with her parents and playing with her children. She didn't try to take over my kitchen or criticize how I'd set the table. Dinner was surprisingly pleasant. Everyone passed dishes and made small talk about work and the kids' school activities. Rebecca complimented the food twice. After we ate, Rebecca helped clear plates without being asked. She and I ended up at the sink together loading the dishwasher. She asked about my teaching job and I asked about her marketing work. We talked for maybe 5 minutes about normal things like coworkers and projects. It wasn't warm or friendly exactly, but it was manageable. Civil. When everyone left that evening, Tommy wrapped his arms around me and said that went better than he'd hoped. I agreed. We'd made it through a whole family dinner without fighting or tension. It felt like maybe we could do this. A few weeks later, our first anniversary arrived. Tommy took the day off work and we spent the morning looking through our wedding photos on the couch. For the first time, I could look at those pictures and see past the cake disaster and the drama. I saw Tommy crying when I walked down the aisle. I saw my parents beaming. I saw the moment we said our vows and meant every word. Tommy pulled me close and told me he was grateful I'd stood up to his sister. I asked him what he meant. He said that my refusal to let Rebecca walk all over me had forced their whole family to finally address patterns they'd been enabling for decades. His mother had always made excuses for Rebecca. His father had always kept quiet. But watching what happened at our wedding made them realize they'd created a monster by never holding her accountable. It took something that extreme to make them change. My phone buzzed with a text. I picked it up and saw Rebecca's name. The message was short. I hope you and Tommy have a wonderful day celebrating your marriage. That was it. No long explanation or apology. Just a simple, appropriate message. I showed Tommy and he smiled. We've come a long way, he said. I looked at the text again and realized he was right. Rebecca and I would never be close. We'd never be friends who called each other or went shopping together, but we'd reached something more valuable than forced closeness. We'd reached genuine peace. We could sit at the same table without resentment poisoning everything. We could exchange polite words without it being a performance. We could exist in the same family without constant warfare. The Sunday dinners continued. The holiday gatherings happened. We all showed up and were civil and respectful. Rebecca stayed in therapy and kept working on herself. Tommy's parents learned to stop enabling bad behavior. Craig built a good life for himself and the kids. And Tommy and I built our marriage on a foundation of honesty and boundaries and mutual respect. Sometimes the best resolution isn't perfect reconciliation where everyone becomes best friends. Sometimes it's honest acceptance of complicated reality. It's acknowledging that some relationships will always be difficult, but choosing to move forward anyway with clear boundaries and realistic expectations. It's understanding that peace doesn't mean pretending the past didn't happen. It means learning from it and refusing to let it define your future.